Hello, this is Stuart Roberts. I'm one of the co-founders of Stocks Down Under and Pitt Street Research. Joining me on the afternoon of Tuesday, the 6th of June, 2025, is Mr. Richard Lee, who's the Executive Director of Covirix, Melbourne-based drug development company, still privately held. Richard, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stuart.
Richard, a lot of people have bid good riddance now to COVID-19 in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's still around and circulating in the general population, and of course, it's winter here in the southern hemisphere, so it's about to get a little worse.
Mhm.
For the last several years, your company's been working on a new inhaled antiviral for COVID, which could still be valuable going forward.
Well, not only is it valuable, I like to think that it's now becoming even more valuable for a number of reasons. First of all, from a timing point of view, in the last couple of months, you have now all of a sudden seen another significant resurgence of SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. Started in Asia, in the Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, Thailand, and now come to Australia, but it's also now landed in America as well. In addition to that, there's now a significant fear that the avian flu virus, which is actually now spread amongst all continents of the world, but started with the migratory bird population, the poultry population, the mammalian population, even domestic pets population. That reportedly is about one mutation away from being a human-to-human transmission pandemic as well. So we got to be very mindful of these global developments and find a therapeutic solutions that can actually tackle all these problems or most of these problems rather than just excessively relying on vaccination, actually.
Right, which is what we did during that pandemic. So what you're saying is a drug you began to reprofile with COVID-19 in mind now has broad spectrum
Yes.
antiviral activity,
Yes.
including, we think, variants of avian flu that might be on the scene shortly.
Well, that's the problem. You see, after some 4 years of mass vaccination in most countries, in Australia, for instance, it's over 90% vaccination. The same with a lot of Western countries as well. There is a suggestion that not only are there, is there actually vaccine the hesitancy resulting in the vaccine lower immunity against virus, but there could also be reportedly an immune suppression going on, so that when these viruses does get another wave, we may well be less able to cope with the viruses as well. So in that sort of context, again, what is the solution? Is it just more vaccination? I read some news just now, actually. There's some recommendation from the CDC that it could well be that you need to have a booster every 2 months. I mean, how often are you going to get? I mean, Taiwan is already mandating 2 months gap in terms of booster shots, right? So how often do you need to have boosters? Is that the only solution available? That's why we think that perhaps a more balanced approach in terms of treatment of COVID could well be a targeted, effective antiviral such as ours. Okay.
So basically, you've got a small molecule
Yes.
which is able to be delivered via aerosols. Originally, so the class of drug it's called is glucosidase inhibitor. You were able to show in COVID-19 it was effective in knocking down the virus.
Yes.
Obviously, that makes it applicable amongst a lot of viruses where this is important. What's the next step of the journey for you?
The next step is we've done a lot of work in terms of how we take this forward. The last couple of months we've been having a lot of serious discussion with the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, and what we want to do is to conduct an animal study at the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, which they are totally capable of doing. And then, upon success of that study, we then proceed to human trial at the Hong Kong University Clinical Trial Center. So right now we're actually in discussion to finalize, the timeline, the costing of getting the animal study at the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park for respiratory toxicology study. Now, bear in mind that our drug is going to be reformulated into an inhaled dry powder inhalation drug, And that's why we need to do the respiratory toxicology. Now, because this is a repurposed drug, obviously it was safe for human use previously for another disease application. But because we were reformulating that for dry powder inhalation, that's why we need to make sure that it is safe for respiratory application. Okay.
Okay. So you've got these studies planned shortly. So long as the safety profile of this is good, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is, as I said, upon success of this animal study for respiratory toxicology, we want to start conducting the phase 1/2 clinical trial at the Hong Kong University Clinical Trial Center. Now, we've had discussion with the senior management of the CTC, the Clinical Trial Center in Hong Kong already. They've told us that, number one, their organization as well as the Science Park Lab are both accredited by the major regulatory agencies, as well as that, upon success of the Science Park laboratory study for us, we will then be able to qualify for the human clinical trial at the Hong Kong University.
Right. Now, the sense of urgency out there in Pharmaland for new antivirals is probably not as strong as it was for 3 or 4 years ago for obvious reasons. The landscape, though, as you say, has changed. People want to be prepared for future pandemics. I think, for example, of every now and then, the influenza season is worse than usual, and there's potential for avian flu to contribute to that. And your memory probably stretches back to the at least the 1968 pandemic, which actually originated in Hong Kong. So how are you finding in your discussions with pharma their openness to the product you've got?
I think once we've done the animal study, the respiratory toxicology study, and we generated the data for the success there, I think you find the big pharma will be very keen to talk to us, actually. Now, you mentioned the historical trend of avian flu. I would remind the audience that historically the avian flu mortality rate is over 50%. There is a danger that if the avian flu virus is mixed in with the other seasonal flu virus in a process called reassortment, then you have the worst of both worlds. You have a more infectious virus as well as a highly deadly virus as well. And that is the reason why back in the early this year, when we did the in vitro study, we deliberately tested the drug compound against the 4 viruses, 2 influenza seasonal flu virus, RSV, and avian flu viruses. And we were successful in all that respect. But what I want to point out is that in doing this particular in vitro study, we have deliberately got the human cell line of the respiratory tract. So it's almost like replicating the human respiratory tract in our study. And because we are successful, we're quite happy that that result should be a very strong evidence of the next phase of our success, actually.
Right. Covirix has an interesting name amongst the roster of people involved. Simon Tucker, if you go back in time, was associated with Biota, the company that gave us Relenza originally, as well as a number of other interesting antiviral drugs. How did he come to be involved in Covirix?
Well, because when we started the company back in early 2020, when COVID first started, we actually started talking to somebody with formerly a CEO of Biota, and it was because of that then we got introduced to Simon, and also our drug development expert Seth Mercutio. He's also very closely associated with Simon Tucker as well. And as you know, it's good that you mentioned Simon Tucker's name. Simon was the head of R&D of Biota, and which of course developed and gave us the Relenza, which was an inhalable antiviral as well. And because of that association, naturally, when we develop our drug or repurpose our drug, we just immediately thought about the repurposing the drug and reformulating the drug compound into a dry powder inhalation drug, just like Relenza. Okay.
Right. Richard, tell us about yourself. You're originally from Hong Kong, moved to Australia in the 1980s. What's been your background through those years?
Earlier than that, actually, I came to Australia in 1972.
You've aged very gracefully, Richard, may I say.
I came to Australia in 1972, but I actually, in the past 40 odd years, I mainly have been involved in investment banking. As you know, in investment banking, you really got to have an understanding of many, many industries. And I've been involved in many industries for my investment banking assignments, from mining to now, of course, drug development. And it's been a very enriching, very mental nourishing journey, actually.
Right. So, Covirix made some progress in terms of understanding the utility of their core drug. A bit of toxicology work coming up in Hong Kong shortly, which should roll into potentially a phase 1/2 at leading clinical trial center in Hong Kong.
Yes.
So it's a story that people who are concerned about the potential for infectious diseases of the lung, such as the potential flu season we're coming into in the Southern Hemisphere, should pay close attention.
Well, you see, operating a company successfully is all about having the right people. And I dare say that, our Covirix team is amongst the best in Australia, and it could well be the world as well, in terms of being able to deliver successfully our corporate mission. And that is to deliver an effective targeted antiviral to treat most respiratory diseases. So amongst our board of directors, we have actually got two cardiothoracic surgeons. Our CEO, Dr. Kumar Patel, he's actually a heart-lung transplant surgeon, a world-renowned heart-lung transplant surgeon. And I do believe that, in order to understand what drug is applicable, more effective, and causing less harm, and hopefully no harm to the human body, you need to have a good understanding of the human anatomy. And that's where, our CEO and our other director, Dr. Ian Nixon, comes in. But we also have Simon Tucker, you mentioned before. We also have Dr. David Morton, Professor David Morton, who is actually an inhalable drug delivery expert. He was a co-founder of Vectura, which was actually a company that was founded in the UK, co-founded by David Morton, specializing at high-end inhalable drug delivery technology. And of course, I mentioned Seth Mercutio, who's a drug development and synthesizing expert who used to be the CSIR as well. Now, before I move on to that, our internal people, we also have a number of experts as well, but chief among them is actually Professor Ivan Hong out of Hong Kong, who was one of the two Hong Kong government spokesperson on all COVID matters as well. He's a renowned infectious disease expert as well. So with that kind of lineup, I think that we have adequate expertise to deliver what we want to achieve in terms of delivering an effective targeted antiviral to the world.
Okay. Richard Lee, thank you for joining Pitt Street Research and Stocks Down Under.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks for the opportunity.